Hi, it's Penny Black and Jill Foster here for your next PB&J card class, and today I'll be featuring one of Penny Black's newest slapstick cling stamps, Poppy Trio. And I'm going to be creating a card with a watercolor effect. If you've seen any videos with no line coloring for Copics or alcohol ink markers, I used this concept, but you did it with watercolors. So I'm working on Strathmore watercolor paper. It's cold pressed watercolor paper, 140 pound. And I'm going to ink my stamp with Distress ink in the color of Wild Honey. And essentially, I just wanted to pick an ink that was light in color and also one that would blend with water so that as I work on this, those outlines essentially blend away. So I stamp that directly onto my watercolor paper. I use the smoother side of the watercolor paper, but for this technique it really wouldn't matter. Now I'm going to be doing my watercoloring with the Tombow markers, and I'm using an acrylic block as a palette. So I've colored with that marker onto my acrylic block, and I'm picking that up with a very small paintbrush. And I'm going to start by painting in the leaves. And I'm going to zoom in here so you can see this and also get my head out of the way. But what I'm doing is I'm just laying down a light wash of color. So I wanted to get that across the entire leaf. And as I work throughout this entire piece, either the flower petal or here where I'm working on the leaves, I work in areas that are not touching each other. So you'll see me kind of bounce around the image to different areas that aren't touching each other. The other part of this technique is that often I will put down a layer of just clean water onto the area before I add the watercolor, because the paint will only spread in the areas on the paper that are already wet. So this helps you stay in the lines since there isn't an outline there to stop you. So at the beginning there, I just put down my layer of water first, and now I'm picking up the color from my palette and painting it on. So like I said, I'm going to kind of bounce around the image so I don't do any areas that are touching. This next area is going to be the flower. So I'm putting down just the water and coloring that inside part of the petal. Now I will pick up my watercolor. This is the marker from the acrylic block, and I'm just going to drop that in on the area that's wet. And it's so cool, it just automatically does the blending and shading for you. So I wanted the outer edges to be darker, so that's where I initially put the paintbrush, and then I let it spread into the center. And if there's a little bit, if your brush isn't completely clean, you can see there's a little pink left on mine, but it's mostly water. That's fine too. And then I'll pick up this and drop it in, and you can just see it spread. So I just kept continuing to do this, but I did leave some of these petals that are behind another petal. I wanted to do them after the fact so I could keep track of where I was adding darker shading, so I didn't end up with just this wash of color across the entire thing. So here I've just added that water in, and now I'm going to take my marker and color right onto the area that touches the edge of the other petal. So this one I'm coloring right now sits in the back, and so I want that to be darker. And these I did do one at a time so I didn't lose track of a petal and it all just ended up blending and looking the same color. So I did dry that, and now I'm adding my marker on top. I'm able to get a lot more pigment down. So this is marker directly to the paper, and then I'll go in with my water and blend it. And there you get that darker shadow and the movement of the different petals that are on top of each other and behind. So I continue to do that around all of the petals. And now I wanted to add the center. So this is just, I colored with the black Tombow marker onto my acrylic block, added a lot of water, and then just put it directly onto the image. And then I'm adding some water around the outside just to blend it out. And I love when it dries and kind of puddles up. So I'm going to do the same here. And you can't see it, it's off camera, but I did stamp this image onto a piece of scratch paper so I can look at it as a reference. But if it doesn't end up looking exactly like the original, if one petal blends into another, it's really not a big deal because nobody's looking at the original stamp. So here I'm just blending in that black, again with lots of water. It just gets a purplish gray look, a shadow look. And then I'll do the same on this flower. Going back with just water to blend it a little bit more. And you can keep adding a little bit more, going back and forth. I wanted to darken it up, and because it's still wet, you can see it, that ink just automatically spread. Then I just took the fine point tip of that same marker and added a few dots to the center. Now I was ready to move on, and I'm going to show you how I added shading to the leaves. So I'm just coloring directly onto the leaf, sort of down that center and creating the veins. And this is just direct marker to the paper. Then using a wet brush, I'm just blending that. And this is a very fine tip brush. And then I'm going back with the brush tip of the marker to get even more pigment down. And then blending that out with a brush and kind of letting it puddle and pool in the areas that I would like to be darker. So here's another look at that finished card. Thank you so much for joining me today. Visit the Penny Black website for more details and information, www.pennyblackink.com.